Let's talk about Russophobia. This is a word you've probably heard a lot lately, especially with 𝗵𝗲𝗿𝗲's utterly ignorant tweet going viral, but it's also a topic that's quite personal to me. A Lithuanian Ukrainian who was born and lives in Latvia and whose first language is Russian. In the past weeks, we have seen plenty of Russophobia-related content, both fake, such as Ukrainians attacking Russians in Estonia, and some real articles about Russians not being let into restaurants or finding difficulty booking hotels, all of which, especially in current times, is understandable considering what Russia is doing, but by no means represents the opinion of the majority of people in different countries, like Russia likes to present it. So what is Russophobia? Russophobia, by definition, describes a fear or hatred of Russians, Russia itself, and Russian culture. While it does exist in narrow circles of especially aggressive people who tend to foster hate towards other groups of people too, Russophobia, in the way it manifests today, is more of a foreign policy tool and weapon of Russia itself. Rather than a widespread and serious concern regarding human rights, it is more of an artificial construct created through Russian media, teaching Russians to hate and fear the world around them. And it's also vital to keeping Putin's regime in its place. So why does Putin need Russophobia so much? Firstly, considering that Russia is a KGB-run state, it is a master of manipulating people's minds, and the main strategy the regime uses to sustain its power is through creating an us versus them mentality. As long as Russia has enemies, Russophobes around it, the country can stay united to fight against these enemies. It is a mass-marketed paranoia that makes it easy to sustain domestic support for starting military conflicts abroad or even committing war crimes, and there's always somebody else to blame for it. What we have seen during the war in Georgia, the war in 𝗵𝗶𝗿𝗲, the annexation of Crimea, and now the invasion of Ukraine, the attacker becomes the victim, and the victim is then accused of starting the conflict. A great but tragic example of this is how Ukraine right now, simply through the virtue of being a sovereign state, is being accused of Nazism, of oppressing Russian speakers, and even through creating nuclear capabilities to destroy Russia and Belarus. Even though Ukraine, which was the third largest nuclear power in the world, gave up its entire nuclear arsenal in 1994. Secondly, that same us versus them mentality makes people focus more on foreign policy rather than domestic politics. It's a fantastic tool to distract people from lack of development, inequality, poverty, and a plethora of other issues that face Russia, especially outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg. It also allows to shift the blame from the local policymakers and the local oligarchs towards the big bad West. Even now, with the sanctions that have been put on Russia for a reason as a result of its own actions that will create a huge lack of resources and a soaring unemployment, all of the blame is put on the West and not on the state that is currently bombarding residential buildings and killing innocent civilians. The sad thing is also how much I've seen Russophobia manifest in normal everyday life, and not in the way you'd expect. I have plenty of wonderful Russian friends who just naturally assume that Latvia, my homeland, hates Russians. Neither me nor my mother, whose roots are in Ukraine and who has spoken Russian in Latvia her entire life, neither our family friends who are Russian and have emigrated to Latvia and go to banks here and to stores and to state institutions have felt any form of discrimination or oppression in Latvia. Sure, there are things that could have done better to integrate people culturally and language-wise after the Soviet times, but generally there is no us versus them. We're one country, and any rational thinking human being will know to separate a Russian speaker or a Russian person from the regime in the Kremlin. Even now, in times of war, most of my friends, acquaintances, and family members who are Russian speakers who have found themselves abroad have been met with compassion because people understand that they are also the victims of the circumstances of the regime. So what can we do now that we understand the role Russophobia plays politically? Be kind, calm, understanding, and compassionate towards the people around us, especially if they're Russians or Russian speakers. Let's not push people further into the claws of the Kremlin bear, because that will actually only end up helping the bear.